This is Andrew Petty is Dying, where we tap into the power of our mortality to become the people we were made to be and live the lives we were made to live. I'm your host, Andrew Petty, and I'm dying. I hate to say it, but so are you. What is bravery? Why is it so important? What are some of the counterfeit forms of bravery? How can we identify those counterfeits and eliminate them from our own lives? How can we become braver? Todd Henry is an arms dealer for the creative revolution, an author of 7 books, a veteran podcaster of 19 years, who speaks internationally on creativity, productivity, and passion for work, and helps people and teams generate brilliant ideas. Todd's new book, The Brave Habit, is a concise, persuasive, and timely treatise on bravery. In today's conversation, we explore bravery through the lens of the Brave Habit in pursuit of actionable insights for all of us. Todd also shares how an encounter with mortality when he was just 15 years old radically altered his perception of risk and what's most important. I first invited Todd to be on the show in early 2020. The timing wasn't right for a variety of reasons, though, and then COVID hit and all bets were off for a while. I'm grateful 4 years later to be able to bring you Todd's wisdom and insights today. Todd, in your new book, The Brave Habit, which has just come out, and I've got my copy and it's well worn from reading it this weekend, you propose something pretty astounding, actually, that our lives can be measured by the number of moments in which we overcame cowardice and acted bravely. First, how do you define bravery? Because you have a specific definition. And then what's led you to hold it in such high regard?
So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be chatting with you. And it is a long time coming, and I appreciate all the great work that you do.
Likewise, thank you.
So bravery, as I define it in the book, is doing the right thing even in the face of fear and personal loss. Meaning that, listen, we all have fear in our lives. We all understand the stakes that action could yield in our life. The results of that could be losing something that matters to us. As a matter of fact, I would argue that without that uncertainty and without those stakes, bravery can't exist. It's not really brave if you know you're not going to lose something potentially on the other side of your action. And the reason I believe it's so important is because if you talk to people, as I know that you have, and I have talked to many people who about their lives and what they value and what they take pride in and what they regret, almost all of the things that they take pride in are those moments when they acted instead of succumbing to cowardice. It's when they decided to take a chance or speak up or say something or in some way bridge the gap between inaction and valuable action. And so the reason I wanted to write this book was just to encourage people to understand that bravery is not some unattainable ideal. It's something that we can actually develop a habit of in our lives. So we can, in small ways, develop the disposition toward acting in the face of uncertainty instead of succumbing, instead of retreating into comfort and cowardice. We can choose to do hard things consistently. And those smaller moments of bravery train us for the bigger moments of bravery when we might actually have to take a leap. We might actually have to do something that could cost us. But if we haven't prepared ourselves for those moments, then it becomes more difficult to make those choices.
Cultivation, it's such an interesting word because, and I appreciate that, and I agree completely with that. And you're one of the first people I've found who's talking about it this way. It's so unsexy to think about having to cultivate a habit like that. But, the alternatives are really unpleasant because, as you say, when moments arise where bravery is required, we may find ourselves unequipped to meet and rise to that occasion. How did you personally come to the point where you hold bravery in such high regard? You've obviously been working along a timeline in your life of discovery and incremental refinement of your own thoughts to the point that I think you even said in the book that this may be your favorite book so far. So what's behind that, and why do you hold bravery in such high regard?
So 11 years ago, I released a book called Die Empty, and the book did very well and really articulated some of the places people get stuck in their lives and how to move beyond that and build a body of work you can be proud of. And shortly after it released, I had sort of a forehead slap moment because I realized there was one topic I hadn't addressed in the book, and it was bravery. As a matter of fact, it bothered me so much that every time I went out and spoke about that book to groups of people, I always then reframed it and looked at it through the lens of bravery, that it takes bravery to do these things that we're talking about. But that was something I didn't even address in the book. And so since about 2015, I've been wanting to write a book about bravery. But over the last several years, I've been impacted by a lot of things happening in the world, by cultural events, political events, economic events, events in the marketplace. I've been seeing a lot of what I would call conspicuous cowardice, people, doing things that are, that may appear brave, but they're really just bravado. They're not really bravery because they're not being done on behalf of other people. They're being done to, for a person or an organization's own self-enrichment. And it really bothered me a lot because I felt like we were losing the definition of this very important word, bravery. And also we were witnessing the celebration of what could only be called cowardice, which was, lobbing insults across the bow at other people we disagree with, or self-enrichment at the expense of other people, and forgetting about other people who are desperately in need. And so I really sort of wanted to reclaim a clear understanding and definition of this word bravery, and also put the impetus on each of us, anybody reading, that listen, you have a responsibility to be a courageous leader in whatever sphere of influence you have, whether that's your family, your neighborhood, your city, your business, your organization, with your collaborators, if you lead a team of people, or if you have even more responsibility, if you're a leader who's leading a city or leading a state or leading a country, whatever your responsibility is, there is a mantle of responsibility you have to model courageous leadership. And so I wanted to really sort of reclaim that. But the problem was it took me several years to kind of really get to the bottom of what bravery actually means, what it looks like. And I kept discovering all of these interesting bits of research that sent me down alleyways and kind of redirected my thoughts. And so it took 7 years. And I actually even wrote and released 3 other books in the interim since I started working on this project. It took me about 7 years to really pull these ideas together and to get down to 150 pages, which is kind of funny. You think it would take, I would be trying to write more pages, but actually I was trying to get down to a crisp 150 pages with this book. So that it was a very concise argument that I was making.
So as you began to sink your teeth into what you believed was a really juicy steak in terms of having meaning and value for we humans, you found, gosh, there's a lot here. I've got to spend quite a bit of time until I really have wrapped my head around at least my first attempt to express what bravery is and how we can cultivate it. Yeah. I really appreciated how in your book, in the first third roughly, you took great pains to spell out what bravery is and what bravery isn't. And that was really helpful to me. Even as someone who's thought a lot about this, I thought this is a really helpful articulation, and it helps me know when I'm embodying that thing and when I'm not. One of the things that strikes me about your definition of bravery is that you say it's doing the right thing. And I'm guessing that some of your worldview is bubbling up to the surface in that phrase, because one might say bravery is doing something rather than succumbing to inaction. So how is it that right thing got in there instead of just doing something?
Because a lot of what we call bravery in the world is actually not bravery. It's just bravado. It's just boldness, maybe. If I make a leap into the unknown without any understanding of what the cost might be, that's not necessarily bravery, because I'm not, I don't even realize I'm risking something. I'm just, I'm naive maybe, but I'm not necessarily brave. And so I think, we often call people brave who aren't really risking anything. They're just making bold leaps. At the same time, I might do something bold that enriches myself at the expense of other people. And I wanted to clearly delineate between boldness and bravery in that context, that making bold statements or doing bold things to enrich myself when it costs somebody else is not necessarily bravery either. And so one of the arguments I make early in the book is bravery is always about the other. And the other could be a person, of course, right? That's what we think of when we think of bravery. We think of running into burning buildings and rescuing people, or storming into battle, and sacrificing your life on behalf of an ideal. But it could also be a principle. It could be an idea. It could be something that you're sacrificing on behalf of because you believe that it matters so much it's worth taking the risk for. And so I think when we're considering acting bravely, we have to have that other in mind. Just to make it really practical, you're in an organization And you know that there's something that needs to be said that's not being said because everyone else is retreating into comfort and cowardice because they're afraid of how it will look if they speak up and they challenge their manager's point of view, or maybe they don't want to, they don't want to lose their livelihood, or they don't want to be relegated to the sidelines on a project. And so they don't speak up because they want the safety and security of, of what comes with, recognition from their manager. Speaking up is an act of bravery because you believe in something something out there, an ideal that you're not willing to allow to fall by the wayside. And so you're willing to speak up on behalf of that ideal. That's an act of bravery because you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable position in order to pursue an ideal. And so I think all of us, and this is what I argue in the book as well, is that, bravery exists in the fertile field where you have a vision, an optimistic vision of a better possible future. You have to keep that vision of a better possible future affixed in your mind in order to be able to pursue bravery consistently.
So when you say right thing, there's both a moral component. I hear a clear moral component there. And there's also just an intellect, for lack of a better word, an intellectual component. Doing the right thing means taking the next prudent step, not the next reckless or just, Hail Mary kind of step forward. So there's both a cognitive and a moral component involved there.
There definitely is. And also bravery is not always acting. Bravery can also look like letting go. It can mean letting go of something that's working really well because you need to move on. And without letting go, you can't move on. Bravery can also mean waiting sometimes. Everybody else is telling you, rush in, storm the beach, go launch the thing, leap off the cliff. Well, they don't really care about you. They just want to see what happens if you do it, right? But the bravest thing you can do is to plant your feet and say, I know what I value. I know where I'm going, but I know I'm not yet equipped to get there. And so I'm going to plant my feet and grow deep roots until I feel like I'm ready to move, even though the cultural tide is moving against me. That's an act of bravery as well. And we don't celebrate that. We celebrate the people who are the risk takers, the first movers, the first leapers, but we don't always celebrate the people who say, no, I'm just going to plant my feet right here and grow deep roots and, grow a life, grow an impact that matters to me. And when the time comes, I will take that strategic risk. But right now is not the time. That's not a popular conception of bravery, but it's brave nonetheless.
So there's the willingness to delay gratification and to swim against the tide and to do many of the things I think that culturally are not celebrated, when the temptation would be instead to demonstrate some of the bravado and what did you call it? There were two C's, some kind of cowardice.
Complacency and cowardice, or comfort and cowardice. Yeah.
Yeah, complacency and cowardice.
Yeah.
You've said that writing The Brave Habit was personally transformative. I think you said that on one of your most recent episodes of your new podcast. How so?
Well, so I was writing this book that was challenging people to do brave, authentic work. And one of the questions that I began asking myself in the midst of writing this book was, if you were to start over again, would you be doing things the way that you're doing them now? And that was one of the questions I challenged people with in the book, right? And I asked myself the same question, and I came to realize, actually, no, I wouldn't. I would be doing things very differently if I were starting over again. I've been podcasting for 18 years, since 2005. Started the podcast when podcasting was like barely a whisper of a thing, and it's done very well. And frankly, was still doing very, very well. But I realized that my heart wasn't really in the work the way that it once was, and that the audience has changed, and that it was time for me to change. But that's a very uncomfortable thing to do when you have built a thing, right? Because when you become known for a thing, everything in your being wants to protect that thing at all costs, wants to circle the wagons. And while it seems like that would be the prudent thing to do, that's actually a shortcut to death, to business death. And so I decided to basically blow up the show after 18 years. Started over with episode 1 on January 1st of 2024. We're now on episode 9, 10, 11, something like that. And so we renamed the show because it was called The Accidental Creative before, which has been the name for 18 years. And I just realized that name isn't resonating in the same way it once did, years and years ago. And so we renamed it Daily Creative and turned it into more of a storytelling produced format instead of an interview show, because we felt like that's where the audience is now. And it's also something that is more uniquely suited to my gift set, right? And kind of what I do, which I go on stage and I teach people. That's what I do. So why would I not want the podcast to reflect kind of what I do when I'm on stage teaching people. And so, yeah, but it was a very scary thing because that meant getting rid of the back catalog. That meant foregoing a lot of revenue that we were making on advertising and completely changing everything up and realizing people might walk away. People might not like it, but you know what? It's the right thing. There's a vision I have of where I want the work to go. And the brave action in this case is being willing to not just, okay, we're going to make some tweaks, but actually get rid of 18 years of work, start over again with a brand new format, a brand new name, and trust that on the other side of it, that people are going to resonate with it because it's the right thing to do. And frankly, even if people do walk away, if people don't like it, which fortunately they have, and our audience has been growing, which is great. But even if they didn't, it was still the right thing to do, even if it failed, because it was something I could be proud of. And so that was, I guess, in some ways how the book itself really impacted me. Was it caused me to start asking some questions about, okay, where have you become complacent? Where are you sort of settling into comfort in your life and in your work? And really pushed me to start making some difficult changes in my own life and my own work.
And Todd, you said, even if it doesn't go as I've hoped, and even if it doesn't meet success metrics like I might look for, it still was the right thing to do because it's a choice you'll always be proud of. I want to really highlight that for myself, for our listeners, that in this case, the right thing is not outcome based specifically. It's more about who I find myself to be in response to this moment. And that is a path to becoming someone we feel genuinely good about. And you're certainly well along that path. And by the way, the podcast is really well produced. You guys have done a great job. And clearly you've created some really good partnerships with Josh and other folks in the midst who have created a really rich storytelling environment. So well done.
Well, that's another thing that we have to realize. Like, it's really difficult for us to, I mean, sometimes making those changes means bringing other people in, and it means sharing the dream a little bit with other people, which is also difficult for some people, right? Like, it's hard to open yourself up and to be willing to dream with other people, especially if you've been doing something, kind of on your own, which the podcast has always kind of been a solo thing for me for years and years. And, to open that up then to be dreaming with somebody else and to let them kind of handle something that's felt a little bit like a baby, right? Like, this is something I kind of like created and nurtured and kind of grew. And then I'm sort of handing it over to somebody else and saying, all right, let's co-parent this baby and try to figure out where it's going. That's a really difficult thing to do, but it's been an incredible experience, right? Because it's really opened, you don't realize sometimes the ways that you're succumbing to comfort, or the ways that you're settling in, or the ways that you're compromising your vision, until somebody else comes in and starts poking and prodding and asking, okay, why are we doing that? And why is this the case? And no, I don't think that's good enough. I think we should rethink that, right? You don't realize it until somebody else starts poking and prodding at it. And then you realize, like, oh, even after making this leap, like, there's still comfortable patterns I have to continue to disrupt, because that's our nature, is just to sort of move to whatever is the most comfortable thing. And so bravery is not a one-time act. That's why the book's called The Brave Habit. It's a consistent, continual thing. We have to consistently act with bravery every single day of our life. And by doing so, we develop the habit. We develop it like a muscle, right? And so we're ready to respond in those moments when we're challenged.
That's awesome. I love that. And you talking about bringing your solo baby into the arms of other people to tend and to look at and to help you manage. It really reminds me that, just like a human baby doesn't thrive in isolation and with just one person in their life, neither do our creative endeavors. And I can appreciate the ego hits that can occur when we allow someone else to kind of poke and prod at the thing that we've brought into the world. I don't know what it's been like for you. My guess is, just based upon your expression and the way you're talking about it, but my experiences that I've had with allowing other people to poke and prod my stuff is, it's exhilarating, because I'm finally no longer subject just to my own capacity, and whatever ideas I've had that had some legs now find traction that they wouldn't have had if it had just been me dealing with it. So hats off to you for being willing to do that. We've only got a couple minutes left, but I would hate to not give you a moment to speak to this. You had a close encounter with mortality when you were 15, and it was clearly, if not one of the most defining moments in your life. What happened, and how did it change you?
So I was playing in the varsity basketball game. I was a sophomore in high school, started feeling some tightness in my back. And so I told my coach, like, I need to come out of the game. And so I did, stretched out, but I just couldn't fix whatever was going on. And so I just basically sat the rest of the game, went home that night, ate dinner, like everything was normal, went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't move my legs. I had shooting pain up and down my back. And every time I would move my toe left or right, maybe an inch, I just felt the shooting pain up and down my back. And so I rolled out of my bed, painfully crawled arm over arm into the hallway, yelled for my parents. They called an ambulance, went to the hospital. They did an x-ray and they saw a mass in my stomach. And initially they thought it was probably a cancerous tumor. I mean, that's what you would obviously think. And so they told my parents, like, we think he has a cancerous tumor in his abdomen that was pressing against my sciatic nerve. And they did exploratory surgery and they realized actually it wasn't a cancerous tumor. It was an infection in the muscle, but they weren't equipped to deal with it. So they transferred me to another hospital where my doctor was Dr. Michael Brady. I kid you not, Dr. Mike Brady, like from the Brady Bunch, which was, just kind of funny to me. I remember to this day. And he told my parents, if I can save him, I'm going to have to pump him full of so many antibiotics. There's almost certainly going to be significant side effects. And they said, well, of course, save him if you can. So they did. They started putting antibiotics in me. This was a multi-week process. I lost 50 pounds. I went in as like an athletic 6'3", 185-pound muscular, kid, and came out at 130, 131 pounds. So I'd lost like 50 pounds. And it was like muscle. Like I didn't have a lot of fat, to lose. They told me I probably wouldn't play basketball again. I would be able to walk again, but basketball probably wasn't going to be in the cards just because of the short time frame I would have to recover, and I wasn't willing to accept that. So I got out of the hospital, went through physical training, physical therapy, ended up actually getting to play basketball the following year, and then ended up getting to play my senior year as well and had a really good career in basketball. But the thing that really taught me, the real gift of that, and it's so funny because I look back on it now as such a gift. It was, everybody coming in my hospital room was choosing their words very carefully, saying things, very, very carefully. And I realized like later, I didn't realize at the time, I was too naive, but I realized later, like they thought they were saying their last words to me. Like they thought that I was going to die, and that leaves an impact on you as a teenager when you realize, oh, everybody thought I was going to die. And I didn't know that at the time, That experience really shifted my perspective quite a bit because I realized that things I thought were really important really weren't all that important. Once you face mortality, especially at that young age, it's almost a real gift to you. I began like playing and performing music publicly. I like asked girls out who are way out of my league. Like I began to ask girls out because I'm like, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like I've just been in the hospital for, months, like thinking I was going to die. So, it's funny, like, we often have these narratives in our head that tell us like, well, you really shouldn't do that, or maybe you ought not do that. Fear often comes disguised as wisdom in our lives. These narratives that we hear that are really fear-based often come disguised as wisdom. And so they can be very deceptive. And the moment that we realize, actually, I have the ability to act in the face of that fear, I have the ability to do what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, it completely changes your perspective on life. It changes your perspective on work. It changes your perspective on relationships. It really reframes your decision-making process in every area of your life. And so the thing I would encourage people to consider is, are you believing any narratives in your life that may appear like wisdom to you, but they're actually just fear whispering in your ear, trying to keep you in that place of comfort and complacency? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it?
Awesome. Todd, so grateful for your time here, and our time has come to an end today. I'm so grateful that the gift of your encounter with mortality has been mogrified, using old Calvin and Hobbes term, I don't know if you remember that or not, into a gift for all of us, because you've dedicated yourself to helping others evolve into the best people that they can be. And that, of course, is not just a benefit to the individual, but it's a benefit to every concentric circle out from that person and ripples. And, your book has reached me. Your books have reached me and impacted me. So thank you. Keep up the good work. How can our listeners connect with you and find your work? Is it just toddhenry.com? Is that the best one-stop shopping?
toddhenry.com is the place you can find me and my work, my books, my speaking, all those things. And the podcast is Daily Creative with Todd Henry. So search for it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Everybody, I hope you do. Please check out what Todd is doing. You will learn a tremendous amount. And remember, as always, you are going to die, but you are not dead yet. So get after it. What stuck with you from this conversation? Don't overthink it. Just ask yourself, what caught my attention? Remember, insight plus action equals transformation. Take a moment to acknowledge the thing that stuck with you. Write it down somewhere. that will be easy to refer to again. Next, identify the one thing you're willing and able to do today to put that insight into action. It doesn't need to be earth-shaking, though it can be if you're up for it. More commonly, though, simply the next step toward the thing that calls to you is the right step. Then, having taken that step, your world will look slightly different than before, even if that difference is perceptible only to you. From that slightly different vantage point, you will have the ability to generate a new insight or two and take new action. Wash, rinse, repeat. Before you know it, day by day, week by week, month by month, and year by year, you will find yourself somewhere very different than before. Though it almost certainly won't be where you expected to be, because that's not how life works, you can be certain that you will be someone different than before, wiser, more competent, and braver, better able to handle whatever life throws at you and tackle new frontiers voluntarily. A reminder before I sign off today that this show now airs every 4 weeks instead of every 2, and on Tuesdays instead of Mondays. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Thank you for your time, trust, and attention as always. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with your friends. I'll see you next time on Andrew Petty is Dying, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.